It's more confusion. The only thing certain about yesterday was uncertainty moving forward. And with investments in the U.S. and Canada, everything's stalled right now. And it's really, really concerning. So we're going to continue on. And I always say in every interview, Canadians love Americans. I love Americans. We love the U.S. I lived there for 20 years. And this is insanity.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford is making the media rounds, most recently with NBC's Garrett Haake in Toronto, not afraid to brawl publicly with President Donald Trump over his on-again, off-again tariff strategy. On CNN, Canadian Foreign Minister Melanie Joly also offered this blistering attack.
We've been shown too much disrespect by the Trump administration at this point, calling us a 51st state, calling our prime minister governor. This is not only a personal issue between Prime Minister Trudeau and President Trump. It's way more than that.
Joining me now is Katie Simpson, senior foreign correspondent for CBC News. Katie, something must be going on if the Americans are calling, going up to Canada to do interviews, and we have you here today. Let me just say, I want to start on the tariffs. How is this playing domestically in Canada?
There is nothing that is sucking up more oxygen in Canada right now. And because the power of these tariffs, it can cause such widespread economic harm in Canada. Thousands of job losses. It's expected to trigger a recession. It's completely upending how businesses are able to use the supply chain. Canada is a much smaller country population-wise than the United States, and Canadian businesses rely on accessing the American market. And there is this free trade agreement that Donald Trump himself had renegotiated. And, people thought that those were going to be the rules for trade, the rules for business. And now with all of this uncertainty, not only is it very difficult for businesses and difficult for the politicians to sort of sort through trying to figure out what Donald Trump thinks or means or what he's going to do next or how it's going to have an impact on Canada. But Canadians, like regular Canadians, are so angry. You see it with the booing of the national anthem. Canadians are choosing to do things like buy Canadian products rather than buying American products. Some American products are being pulled off shelves in Canada. And anecdotally, we hear these stories about Canadians who would be going to America on vacation. They're changing their plans instead. They're shifting those kinds of things. So that's sort of, it is sucking up all of the oxygen in this moment in Canada, and Canadians are so angry.
From the beginning, I have thought this, the tariffs conversation, specifically as it relates to Canada, is directly connected to the president talking about making Canada the 51st state. And there's now new reporting in the New York Times, and the headline is how Trump's 51st state Canada talk came to be seen as deadly serious. President Trump, in an early February call, challenged the border treaty between the two countries and told Justin Trudeau he didn't like their shared water agreements. Trudeau told the news media in Ottawa what he wants is to see a total collapse of the Canadian economy because that'll make it easier to annex us. From the beginning, I have said to folks, when I heard Donald Trump talking about making Canada the 51st state, and I heard American journalists say, oh, well, the president is really into, territorial expansion, I paused, because to me that sounds like the language of Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin is into the territorial expansion. It's just, the president seems to not care about the sovereignty and the borders and the rules and the laws. And it seems as though that the Canadians are taking this seriously.
So Justin Trudeau was caught on a hot mic moment when he was speaking to business leaders in Toronto a few weeks ago, where he talked about how it is the view from the Prime Minister's office that Donald Trump is serious when it comes to trying to take Canada by economic force, and that these tariffs, the instability and the harm it's going to cause, the job losses, the heading toward recession, those kinds of things, will make it easier for Donald Trump to sort of proceed. And ever since that moment happened, there have been a series of questions, and some of to the Prime Minister about this, about whether the Canadian government actually sees this as a serious threat. There is deep concern in Canada, and it's making Canadians, again, I hate to keep going back to this point, but Canadians are so angry. But with some of my reporting that I've been doing, speaking with sources and senior Canadian government officials, there is deep concern that he is very serious, that Donald Trump is expansionist, and it starts with this economic force that Donald Trump, the harm that all of these tariffs could cause to the Canadian economy.
So then what can Canada do to stop this? And it's like, it sounds crazy to say, but I mean, it is, what can Canada do to defend itself against this economic, literally, this is economic warfare that the president seems to be trying to wage onto the people of Canada. And then secondly, was this a factor in Prime Minister Trudeau not seeking re-election?
So there's a whole bunch of domestic politics at play with Justin Trudeau. Canada, the term was sort of coming to an end. His minority parliament was going to be over sometime this year in 2025. It was sort of sped up by the departure of his Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland. She quit, put out a scathing letter and said, we disagree fundamentally on how you want to deal with Donald Trump, which is the greatest challenge that Canadians will face in generations because of the hostile economic threats that have been taking place. And that sort of, Justin Trudeau was already deeply unpopular in Canada, and it was getting worse and worse and worse. And that sort of was seen as the tipping point. And really, there was a big scandal in Canada about how Chrystia Freeland is the deputy prime minister, but also the finance minister. And the prime minister had proposed to her, listen, we're going to make you you're going to deal mostly with Canada-U.S. relations. We're going to bring in this other guy, Mark Carney, to come and be the finance minister. Mark Carney, who is the former governor of Bank of Canada, former governor of Bank of England. And it was always thought that he had leadership aspirations. Well, when Chrystia Freeland heard that during a Zoom call with the prime minister on a Friday, she quit very publicly by Monday morning.
She was like, not on my watch.
So she was not having that. That was going to be a no for her. So that happened, and that was sort of the final sort of push. But the thing is, dealing with Donald Trump is going to be the ballot box question in Canada.